Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. These words were born not in the comfort of an academic office, but in the darkness of a Nazi concentration camp. They represent one of the most profound insights ever discovered about the human condition. Today, we explore how Viktor Frankl transformed unimaginable suffering into one of humanity's most enduring gifts, a legacy that continues to illuminate lives across the globe nearly 8 decades later. Viktor Emil Frankl was born in Vienna on March 26, 1905, into a world that was rapidly changing. The Austrian capital stood at the crossroads of empires, a melting pot of ideas, cultures, and revolutionary thinking. This was the same Vienna that would give birth to 3 revolutionary schools of psychology that would forever change how we understand the human mind. First came Sigmund Freud with psychoanalysis, revealing the hidden depths of the unconscious. Then Alfred Adler emerged with individual psychology, emphasizing the will to power and social interest. Frankl would create the third, logotherapy. But his path to this discovery would lead through humanity's darkest chapter. As a young man growing up in the intellectual ferment of early 20th century Vienna, Frankl was surrounded by groundbreaking thinkers who were reshaping our understanding of human nature. The coffee houses buzzed with philosophical debates. The universities attracted brilliant minds from across Europe, and the very air seemed charged with intellectual electricity. Young Frankl absorbed this atmosphere, studying medicine and specializing in neurology and psychiatry. But even as a student, he was already questioning whether human motivation stemmed solely from the pursuit of pleasure, as Freud suggested, or the will to power, as Adler proposed. He sensed something deeper driving the human spirit, something that would only be fully revealed through his own confrontation with absolute evil. During his university years, Frankl began developing ideas that would later become logotherapy. He noticed that his patients often struggled not with repressed desires or feelings of inferiority, but with a profound sense of meaninglessness. They had food, shelter, relationships, and yet they felt empty inside. This observation planted the first seeds of what would become his life's work. He began to suspect that the primary human drive was neither pleasure nor power, but something far more fundamental, the search for meaning and purpose in existence. Frankl's early professional years were marked by both promise and growing darkness. As he worked with patients suffering from depression and suicidal thoughts, he refined his understanding of meaning as a therapeutic force. He established counseling centers for teenagers, developed innovative therapeutic techniques, and began writing about his emerging theory. But as the 1930s progressed, the shadows of Nazism began to fall across Austria. The young doctor, who spent his days helping people find reasons to live, would soon face the ultimate test of his own will to survive. The annexation of Austria in 1938 changed everything for Vienna's Jewish population. Frankl, despite opportunities to emigrate to America, chose to remain with his aging parents. This decision, born of love and duty, would lead him into the abyss, but also provide the crucible that would forge his greatest insights. As restrictions tightened and persecution intensified, Frankl continued his work as long as possible, treating patients in increasingly dangerous circumstances. He was already formulating the ideas that would become logotherapy, but he could not have imagined that his theory would soon be tested in the most extreme circumstances imaginable. In 1942, the theoretical became brutally personal. Frankl, his wife Tilly, his parents, and other family members were deported to Nazi concentration camps. Everything he owned, everyone he loved, every comfort and security was stripped away in an instant. His life's work, a manuscript on logotherapy he had hidden in his coat lining, was confiscated and destroyed. In that moment of absolute loss, standing naked and shorn in the processing line of Auschwitz, his theory faced its ultimate test. Could a human being find meaning even when reduced to a number, even when death seemed not just possible, but probable? The concentration camps became Frankl's involuntary laboratory, and he became both researcher and subject in humanity's most important experiment. Stripped of everything external, possessions, status, comfort, even his name, he was left with only his inner freedom, the ability to choose his attitude toward his circumstances. Day after day, as he witnessed unimaginable cruelty and suffering, he made a conscious choice to maintain his humanity, his dignity, and his hope for the future. Within the barbed wire and watchtowers of Auschwitz, Theresienstadt, Kaufering, and Turkheim, Frankl made observations that would reshape psychology forever. He watched fellow prisoners and noticed something extraordinary that defied conventional wisdom. Those who survived weren't necessarily the physically strongest, the youngest, or the most privileged. The survivors were those who maintained a sense of purpose, who found meaning even in their darkest hours. Some lived for the memory of loved ones, carrying on internal conversations with spouses or children. Others clung to unfinished work, artistic projects, or professional missions. Still others found meaning in the simple determination to bear witness, to survive, so they could tell the world what had happened. Frankl himself survived by clinging to several powerful sources of meaning. He mentally reconstructed his destroyed manuscript, giving lectures to imaginary audiences about his experiences and insights. He carried on conversations with his beloved wife Tilly, not knowing she had already perished in Bergen-Belsen. He found purpose in small acts of kindness, sharing a piece of bread, offering comfort to a dying prisoner, maintaining dignity in the face of dehumanization. These weren't grand gestures, but quiet choices that preserved his humanity when everything else was being stripped away. One of Frankl's most profound realizations came during a particularly brutal moment. As he stumbled through the darkness on a forced march, his feet bleeding in torn shoes, a fellow prisoner complaining beside him, Frankl suddenly experienced what he would later call a transcendent moment. He began to think about his wife, imagining her face with startling clarity. In that instant, he understood something fundamental about love and meaning, that love transcends physical presence, that the spiritual connection between two people can survive even death itself. This insight would become central to his understanding of meaning, that we find purpose not just in what we do, but in what we love and what we stand for. The camps taught Frankl that suffering, while never desirable, could become meaningful when we choose to grow through it rather than be diminished by it. He observed prisoners who maintained their moral compass, even in extremity, who shared their last piece of bread with others, who refused to let circumstances turn them into something they despised. These individuals, he realized, were exercising the last of human freedoms, the freedom to choose their attitude regardless of external circumstances. This revelation birthed logotherapy, Frankl's third Viennese school of psychotherapy, where Freud focused on the will to pleasure and Adler on the will to power. Frankl identified the will to meaning as humanity's primary motivation. But this wasn't simply an academic theory. It was hard-won wisdom, born from the ultimate human laboratory. He had seen that we can endure almost any suffering if we can find purpose in it. This wasn't about positive thinking or denial. It was about the profound human capacity to transform unavoidable suffering into spiritual triumph through meaning. When Frankl emerged from the camps in 1945, he faced a world that had changed forever. The war was ending, but his personal world lay in ruins. His wife Tilly had died in Bergen-Belsen. His mother had perished in Auschwitz. His brother and other family members were gone. Everything he had known before the war had been swept away. Yet from this devastation emerged his masterpiece, a book that would initially be titled A Psychologist Experiences the Concentration Camp, but would become known to the world as Man's Search for Meaning. Written in just 9 days during the summer of 1945, this slim volume would become one of the most influential books of the 20th century. But its creation was not without struggle. Frankl battled with trauma, survivor's guilt, and the overwhelming task of putting his experiences into words. He dictated much of the book while pacing in his small apartment, unable to sit still as the memories flooded back. The urgency he felt to share his insights drove him forward. He sensed that what he had learned in the camps could help countless others facing their own forms of suffering. The book's power lay in its perfect fusion of personal narrative and universal truth. Frankl didn't just tell his story, he revealed how any person could discover meaning in their own struggles. The first part provided a clinical, yet deeply human account of life in the concentration camps. But the second part was even more revolutionary. It outlined the principles of logotherapy and showed how meaning could be found in any circumstance. He demonstrated that suffering, while never good in itself, could become meaningful when we choose to learn and grow through it rather than be crushed by it. Man's search for meaning resonated far beyond what anyone could have expected. Published first in German in 1946, it was quickly translated into English and then dozens of other languages. The book spoke to Holocaust survivors seeking to understand their experiences, but its appeal extended far beyond that community. It reached anyone who had faced loss, disappointment, illness, or simply the existential challenges of being human in an uncertain world. Readers found in Frankl's story not just inspiration, but practical tools for dealing with their own difficulties. As the book spread across cultures and continents, something remarkable happened. Eastern philosophers found echoes of Buddhist concepts about suffering and transcendence, recognizing in Frankl's work a Western expression of ancient wisdom about the nature of attachment and the path through suffering. Confucian scholars saw parallels with ideas about virtue and meaning through service to others. Western existentialists discovered a bridge between abstract philosophical concepts and lived experience. Christian theologians found resonances with ideas about redemptive suffering and the dignity of the human person. The universality of Frankl's message became clear as the book was embraced across religious, cultural, and philosophical boundaries. It touched something fundamental in human nature, our deep need for purpose and meaning. Readers from vastly different backgrounds found themselves nodding in recognition at Frankl's insights, seeing their own struggles reflected in his observations about the human condition. The Austrian psychiatrist had somehow articulated truths that transcended the specifics of his Holocaust experience to speak to the universal human condition. The book's influence extended far beyond its initial publication and continues to grow with each passing year. It has been translated into more than 30 languages and has sold millions of copies worldwide. More importantly, it has spawned a global movement. Logotherapy training centers emerged on every continent, teaching therapists Frankl's methods. Universities created entire programs devoted to studying meaning and purpose in human life. Researchers began investigating the psychology of meaning, conducting studies that validated Frankl's clinical observations with empirical data. What began as one man's reflection on survival became a global conversation about what makes life worth living. Medical professionals discovered that patients with a strong sense of purpose recovered faster from illness and surgery. Educators found that students who understood the meaning behind their studies performed better and experienced less anxiety. Business leaders recognized that employees who found purpose in their work were more engaged, creative, and resilient. The ripple effects of Frankl's insights touched virtually every domain of human activity. Frankl's revolutionary insight fundamentally shifted the therapeutic paradigm in psychology and psychiatry. Traditional psychotherapy, influenced heavily by Freudian analysis, often focused on the past, asking why we suffer, what childhood trauma shaped us, what genetic predisposition influenced our behavior, what environmental factors contributed to our problems. This backward-looking approach, while valuable in many ways, sometimes left patients feeling trapped by their history, unable to escape the deterministic chains of cause and effect. Frankl proposed something radically different. Instead of asking why we suffer, he asked what meaning we can find in our suffering. This wasn't about denying causation or ignoring the importance of understanding our past. Rather, it was about shifting focus from explanation to purpose, from determinism to freedom, from victimhood to responsibility. He taught that while we may not control what happens to us, we always retain control over what we make of what happens to us. This approach proved remarkably effective across a wide range of mental health challenges. Patients dealing with depression often found new energy when they discovered meaningful activities and relationships. Those struggling with anxiety learned to focus on purposes larger than their fears. Individuals battling addiction discovered that recovery became more sustainable when connected to meaningful goals and values. Cancer patients found that focusing on how they could help other patients gave them strength to endure difficult treatments. Frankl's methods were particularly powerful for what he called existential vacuum, the emptiness and meaninglessness that characterizes so much modern suffering. He observed that many people in affluent societies had their basic needs met, but still experienced profound dissatisfaction. They had enough food, adequate shelter, stable relationships, and yet they felt hollow inside. Traditional therapy might explore childhood roots of this emptiness, but logotherapy asked a different question. What meaning is waiting to be discovered in your life right now? The effectiveness of Frankl's approach has been validated by decades of research and clinical practice, studies show that people with a strong sense of purpose live longer, experience better physical health, show greater resilience to stress, and report higher levels of life satisfaction. The ripple effects of Frankl's work continue expanding decades after his death in 1997. Modern positive psychology builds directly on Frankl's foundation: acceptance and commitment. Therapy incorporates logotherapeutic principles about choosing values-based action. Mindfulness-based interventions echo Frankl's emphasis on present moment awareness and conscious choice. Frankl's influence appears throughout contemporary culture in ways both obvious and subtle. Corporate coaching programs teach employees to find purpose in their work, drawing directly on logotherapeutic principles. Educational philosophy increasingly emphasizes helping students discover not just what to learn, but why learning matters to them personally. Leadership development programs focus on helping managers create meaningful work environments where employees can connect their daily tasks to larger purposes. Perhaps most remarkably, Frankl's insights remain startlingly relevant in our digital age. As technology reshapes human connection and artificial intelligence challenges our understanding of consciousness and meaning, questions about purpose become more urgent than ever. Young people struggling with anxiety and depression in an age of social media and digital overwhelm often discover Frankl's work and find tools for navigating distinctly modern existential challenges. The emphasis Frankl placed on personal responsibility and conscious choice resonates powerfully with those seeking authenticity in an increasingly superficial world. His teaching that meaning cannot be given, but must be found by each person individually, speaks to a generation suspicious of prescribed answers, but hungry for genuine purpose. His insight that meaning is often found through self-transcendence, focusing on something beyond ourselves, offers an antidote to the narcissistic tendencies encouraged by social media culture. Today, Viktor Frankl Institutes operate on every continent, continuing his mission of helping people discover meaning in their lives. Contemporary researchers continue to validate and extend Frankl's insights through sophisticated scientific methods. The field of meaning-centered psychotherapy has evolved far beyond Frankl's original formulations, while maintaining fidelity to his core insights. Educational institutions worldwide have embraced meaning-centered approaches to learning and development. Schools teach students not just academic subjects, but help them discover how their studies connect to their personal values and life purposes. Universities offer courses in positive psychology and meaning-making, recognizing that intellectual development must be accompanied by wisdom about living a purposeful life. The Austrian psychiatrist who lost everything in the camps gave the world something invaluable: proof that meaning can triumph over suffering, that purpose can emerge from pain, that hope can survive even humanity's darkest moments. His legacy reminds us that no matter what we face, personal loss, global crisis, existential uncertainty, or the simple daily challenges of being human, we retain the fundamental freedom to choose our response. In that choice lies our humanity, our dignity, and our hope. Frankl once observed that happiness cannot be pursued directly. It must ensue from meaningful activity. His own life exemplified this truth perfectly. He never sought fame or fortune, but found both through his unwavering dedication to understanding and alleviating human suffering. He didn't set out to become one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century. He simply tried to help people find reasons to live. His immortal legacy isn't just his books or theories, but the countless lives transformed by his central insight that life always has potential meaning, even in the most dire circumstances. As we face our own challenges in an uncertain world, Frankl's message remains as relevant and powerful as ever. Whether we're dealing with personal setbacks, global crises, health challenges, relationship difficulties, career transitions, or simply the fundamental question of what makes life meaningful, his work provides both comfort and challenge. He comforts us by showing that suffering can have purpose, that meaning can be found in any circumstance, that we are never completely powerless. And he challenges us to take responsibility for finding that meaning in our own lives, to stop waiting for happiness to arrive, and start creating significance through our choices and actions. If this exploration of Viktor Frankl's extraordinary journey and enduring legacy has touched your heart and mind, please subscribe to our channel and share this message with others who might benefit from these timeless insights.